Apple was hit with a nearly $2 billion fine by the European Union related to a case that was brought by Spotify. Basically, Spotify is saying that Apple is acting unlawfully in not allowing them to communicate payment options and direct them to payment solutions outside of Apple's ecosystem for the Spotify app. Now, if you're not familiar with exactly what's going on here, Apple has strict rules on what app developers can and can't say about where they can purchase things on the web versus in an app. If you're purchasing something in an app, Apple is going to take 30% of that purchase. So for a Spotify subscription, for example, if you're paying $10 a month, Apple is going to keep 30% of that, $3 a month. Spotify is going to generate $7 in revenue. Now, this is important for Spotify specifically because Apple is directly competing with Spotify. So Apple has Apple Music, charges the exact same price as Spotify for that service, for that subscription, but Apple obviously doesn't have to pay itself the app charge of 30%. So it can generate a higher margin for that same business while competing with Spotify. To make the same amount of revenue, Spotify would have to charge more on Apple devices than it would for other devices. And they're not allowed to communicate that with consumers with things like links in an app that says, hey, go to this website to purchase your subscription. There are limitations that Apple puts in place. So that's really what is in question here. It's not should Apple be able to charge for using the App Store or for payment solutions, but rather is Apple being fair in the way that it's treating its app developers, especially Spotify, who is actually directly competing with them. So this is one of a number of rulings that have actually gone against Apple in the European Union. The other one is related to the App Store itself. Does Apple have the right to lock down the App Store and have that be the only way to install content onto your device? There was a ruling related to that, but the way that Apple implemented solutions that would potentially provide competition for the App Store, it's going to be so expensive. I believe it was 50 cents per download, per app download, the developers would have to pay to offer an alternative to the App Store. So that would be incredibly expensive, especially for an app like Spotify, where a large percentage of users are not paying for a Spotify subscription. So I want to go through what this ruling was today and what Spotify may do about it. Daniel Ek put a video out on social media today basically saying he was pleased with the ruling, but doubted that Apple was going to be instituting anything that would be a meaningful change. And I think that's probably the right way to think about it if you're Spotify or investors. But this is now starting to be really costly for Apple. And if these kind of fines keep piling up, then we may actually have some meaningful change, at least in the European Union. So that's what I'm going to dig into today. My name is Travis Hoium. Thanks for watching Asymmetric Investing. Please subscribe here on YouTube for all my content. And thanks to this video sponsor, The Motley Fool. If you go to fool.com/ASYM, they'll give you their top 10 stocks to buy right now. So let's go right to the announcement about the ruling. This is from the European Commission. One thing I want to note here is that these pop-ups that pop up, this is actually also related to the European Commission, who wanted to limit the amount of cookies that are included on websites. And what they inadvertently did is caused every single website in the world to have this really annoying pop-up that you have to accept cookies or go to some sort of dialog box. So that may be a little bit of a preview of what is going to happen here, is just more confusion as regulators get involved. But the infringement here is that Apple is currently the sole provider of an app store where developers can distribute content on the iOS platform. And the commission found that Apple bans music streaming app developers from fully informing iOS users about alternative or cheaper music subscription services available outside the app, and from providing any instructions about how to subscribe to such offers. So this is really what's at play here, is that Spotify can't put up an alert on their app that says, hey, if you want to subscribe, go to this website here, click on this link. It's just going to pop up a browser and you can subscribe there. That would be a very simple solution, but Apple doesn't want to do that. Apple wants to keep you in the ecosystem, so you're paying that 30%. So Apple's anti-steering provisions, as they're known, are keeping developers from informing iOS users that they're within their apps about prices of subscription offers available on the internet outside of the App Store. That's what I mentioned. Informing iOS users of different prices between in-app subscriptions and purchases that might be available elsewhere, and then it does not allow links to developers' websites. That was really what was in question with this. And what they said that it caused iOS users to pay significantly higher prices for music streaming subscriptions. That's maybe not directly the case, but what I think is probably the case is that Spotify's business was impaired because Apple is forcing them to pay this premium subscription, this 30% fee. And when they were doing that, I believe they pulled that off of the App Store in most cases and actually pushing people to the website. That happened relatively recently. But this was just to get around this 30% fee and basically put themselves on a level playing field with the Apple Music Store, with Apple Music. Spotify did put out a response. This is the full thing here, but I'm going to just highlight this one section that says Apple has routinely defied laws and court decisions in other markets, so we're looking forward to the next steps that will hopefully clearly and conclusively address Apple's longstanding unfair practices. That gets to the statement that I talked about that Daniel Ek put out, basically saying that Apple has skirted these laws and rulings in the past, so it's likely they're going to do the same here. Thanks to our friends at The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/ASYM for the top 10 stocks to buy right now. What I took away from this ruling today was not really anything about the fact that the European Union is ruling against Apple. I think that's probably to be expected. There are a lot of different things that Apple's doing that are technically against the rules. And then what's probably going to happen is Apple will technically fix the problem and answer the court's questions to the letter of the law, but then actually keep most of those policies in place. That's what they've done in most of these other cases, or add fees that a company like Spotify would have to pay. But a $2 billion fine is still a significant amount of money for Apple, especially in a music business where they're starting to lose market share, and a pretty significant market share, to Spotify. And this is just another thing that's probably going to push consumers to Spotify. Really shows that Spotify is a company that is focused on building the best music experience. Apple's focuses are elsewhere. They're focused on maximizing the revenue from the App Store. I think I really fall under this. I used to pay for Apple Music, but the experience is just simply not as good as Spotify. There's better playlists, better music suggestions, there's the DJ. So just a much better product, and Spotify is winning on the merits despite the fact that Apple has all these institutional advantages on iOS in particular. So I think this is what's really encouraging for Spotify, is that some of those inherent advantages that Apple have may be starting to break down. These are pretty big fines related to this case specifically. And if there is meaningful changes in the way that the App Store runs, in the way that companies can click out to third-party websites like their own website and tell people about premium subscriptions or payments that they can make, that is going to be an incremental positive for margins for Spotify. So I thought this was generally a positive, but really reinforces that Spotify is winning despite the fact that it's got a lot of headwinds in the music business and in podcasts, where Apple had a huge head start over Spotify. But now I think it's pretty clear that Spotify is winning. And if it can win under those conditions, if the market opens up even more because Apple is forced to open up a little bit more, that is going to be just another incremental positive for Spotify. So just another reason to like Spotify's stock. Seems like they are doing the right things, pushing for more openness and more availability for services like theirs, whereas Apple is really starting to close things down. I think that's where, and eventually consumers start to see that kind of thing, and that's where I think there's going to eventually be pushback against Apple. But what do you think about this ruling? Leave your comments in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to Asymmetric Investing. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you here next time.